Samantha sank into her couch, the soft glow of the television painting the room in gentle shades of blue and gold. The day had been long, exhausting, and repetitive. At the library, she had spent hours sorting books, helping patrons, and answering questions that never seemed to end. The routine was familiar, comforting in a way, but tonight, she craved something different. A few hours alone. A chance to drift away in the light, uncomplicated stories of movies. Forgetting the monotony of her daily life. She wrapped herself in a blanket, reaching for the popcorn bowl she had set on the table, and settled in, letting the soft hum of the TV wash over her. The apartment was quiet. Usually, she liked silence. It gave her space to think, but tonight it felt heavy. The kind of quiet that pressed against your ears and made you aware of every creak in the floorboards. Every soft rustle from outside. Samantha sighed, sinking a little deeper into the cushions, wishing for a simple distraction. She had been alone for a few hours now, and the stillness was oddly comforting. Yet at the same time, it stirred a strange, empty feeling in her chest. She shook her head, telling herself she just needed a distraction. Something to focus on besides the faint loneliness that hovered in the room. Then came the knock. Soft at first, almost hesitant, like it belonged to someone unsure whether they should be there. Samantha froze, her hand hovering above the popcorn. It was late. Who would be knocking at her door now? She thought about the possibilities. A neighbor needing help, a delivery gone wrong, or maybe just someone mistaken. But the sound pressed on her nerves, persistent enough that she could no longer ignore it. Another knock came, slightly louder, deliberate, and Samantha's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, and yet she felt a sudden flicker of curiosity. With a careful step, she approached the door, the blanket slipping slightly from her shoulders as she reached for the handle. The moment she opened the door, she paused. Standing there wasn't a stranger, but someone from her past, someone familiar yet unexpectedly grown. Daniel, the son of her old friend Mark, looked at her with a mixture of hesitation and determination. He had grown since the last time she saw him, transforming from the shy, lanky boy she had known into a confident young man. His eyes, however, carried the same warmth she remembered. The same earnestness that had always made him seem genuine and thoughtful. He smiled, awkward but sincere. And in that moment, Samantha felt her pulse quicken. There was something in his presence that made the quiet apartment feel alive again. As if the air had shifted in anticipation of what was about to happen, Daniel's voice broke the silence. "Hey, Samantha. I'm sorry to bother you so late," he said, his tone cautious yet firm. "I was hoping I could talk for a minute." There was a subtle tension in his words, a sense of urgency that made Samantha pause. She stepped aside, letting him enter. As he crossed the threshold, she noticed how his posture was both relaxed and slightly uncertain. It's kind of body language people display when they are opening up, but unsure of the reaction they will receive. The apartment, once still and empty, now carried a gentle energy. Daniel's presence seemed to fill the corners with possibility, the quiet hum of the TV fading into the background as their attention focused entirely on each other. They moved toward the living room, the couch they would sit on seeming suddenly smaller in the presence of unspoken tension. Daniel took a seat, careful not to seem too forward, yet close enough to bridge the distance that had always existed between them. Samantha sat opposite him, still wrapped in her blanket, her mind racing. She thought of the last time she had seen him, a boy who needed guidance and care. And now she faced a young man who carried himself with self-assurance but also a vulnerability she hadn't anticipated. It was a strange mixture of familiarity and discovery, like opening a book she thought she knew, only to find new chapters she had never imagined. Daniel glanced at the television, then back at her, and laughed softly, a sound that seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. "I didn't want to just text. I needed to see you," he admitted. His words were simple, direct, yet they carried weight. Samantha could feel the honesty in his voice, a quiet confession that he needed something she might not fully understand yet. She found herself nodding, sensing that this visit was more than a casual stop. It carried significance, a purpose that neither of them had fully voiced. It was in that pause, in the space between their words, That she realized tonight would be different from any other evening she had planned. Samantha invited him to sit, offering him a cup of tea, something warm to break the initial tension. They talked briefly about ordinary things: work, the city, the weather, but even these mundane topics carried a new undercurrent. Every glance, every slight smile seemed to suggest more than simple conversation. There was a rhythm forming, a connection that had been dormant but was now stirring, fragile and exciting. Samantha felt a curious mix of anticipation and unease. The apartment, quiet and familiar just moments ago, now felt alive with the possibilities of what this unexpected visit might mean. As the minutes passed, Samantha realized how quickly the hours could slip away when conversation was genuine and heartfelt. The television played on, but neither of them noticed. There was something about Daniel's presence that demanded attention, something that made her realize how much she had missed these interactions, even if she hadn't known it at the time. Her loneliness, so palpable an hour ago, seemed lighter now, replaced with an energy that was both thrilling and comforting. She felt her heart flutter at moments when he laughed or when his gaze lingered, a subtle, tender pull she hadn't expected. The night stretched on, the world outside continuing in its own quiet rhythm, unaware of the small, intimate moment unfolding inside Samantha's apartment. Daniel spoke about his life, his uncertainties, and his hopes. And Samantha found herself sharing thoughts she hadn't voiced to anyone in a long time. There was a gentle honesty between them, a rawness that wasn't forced but natural. Like two people rediscovering a connection they thought was lost to time. She noticed how he listened, really listened, and how his eyes conveyed empathy and understanding without judgment. For the first time in a long while, Samantha felt truly seen. Then, just as the night seemed to settle into a comfortable silence, Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but soft. "I know this is sudden, but I'm glad I came," he said. "I needed to see you. I don't know why exactly, but I did." Samantha's heart skipped. There was a vulnerability in his admission, a truth that resonated with her own hidden longing for companionship and understanding. She realized that this visit was more than a casual stop. It was a bridge, a moment that could change the trajectory of both their lives. She smiled faintly, a mixture of warmth and wonder, unsure of what would come next, but aware that nothing would feel quite the same. Again, that is the first part of the evening drew to a close. The quiet apartment, once a symbol of solitude, now carried the weight of potential, of possibilities yet to unfold. The door that had opened unexpectedly had brought with it more than just a visitor, had brought a spark of change, a promise of connection, and the first stirrings of something neither Samantha nor Daniel could have predicted. And as they sat together, the TV flickering softly beside them, the world outside faded, leaving only the fragile, tender moment suspended in time, a moment that marked the beginning of a story neither of them would forget. The moment Daniel stepped into Samantha's apartment, the air between them changed. What had started as a quiet, ordinary night transformed into something charged with anticipation. Samantha had invited him to sit on the couch, and though the television still played in the background, it had become mere decoration. Neither of them paid it any attention. Daniel shifted slightly, unsure where to place his hands, his eyes darting from the flickering screen to Samantha's face. He looked older now, more aware of the world and of himself. Yet there was a softness in his expression that reminded her of the boy she had watched grow up. Samantha felt a jolt of unexpected emotion, a strange mix of nostalgia, curiosity, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. They began with small talk, easing into the conversation carefully, as though testing the waters of their connection. Daniel asked about her work at the library, how the patrons were treating her, and whether she had any plans for the weekend. Samantha responded politely, but found herself drawn into the conversation more than usual. There was something about his tone, the way he leaned forward slightly, the genuine interest in his eyes that made her feel heard in a way she hadn't felt for a long time. It was comforting and exciting all at once. She noticed subtle changes in him, the way his voice had matured, the depth in his gaze. the quiet confidence that seemed to sit behind his hesitant words. As the minutes passed, their conversation naturally shifted from trivial topics to more personal ones. Daniel talked about college, his struggles to find direction, and the pressure of expectations he hadn't shared with anyone before. He spoke with an honesty that was both raw and vulnerable, and Samantha felt herself relaxing into the role of listener. She shared some of her own experiences to moments of disappointment, challenges at work, and the quiet loneliness of her daily life. For the first time in years, it felt like someone was truly listening to her without judgment, without interruption, without the need for small talk to fill the spaces. The connection between them deepened with every word, subtle but undeniable, forming a bridge between past familiarity and present curiosity. There were moments when the conversation paused, and Samantha found herself watching him, studying the way his features caught the soft light of the living room. Daniel wasn't just a visitor. He was a presence that made the room feel warmer, lighter, and more vibrant. Each glance, each smile, carried an emotional weight neither of them had expected. Samantha felt her heart flutter unexpectedly. A realization that Daniel's visit was stirring feelings she hadn't anticipated. There was a magnetic pull, subtle yet persistent, the kind that left her both nervous and intrigued. She tried to dismiss it at first, reminding herself that he was her friend's son, that their connection had always been platonic, but the warmth in his voice and the intensity in his gaze made those thoughts harder to hold onto. Daniel's laughter broke the tension occasionally, light and easy, and Samantha found herself laughing with him, feeling a joy that had been missing from her evenings for a long time. It was a different kind of happiness, not the superficial kind brought by casual entertainment, but a deep emotional resonance, the sense of being understood and seen. Each time their eyes met, there was a quiet acknowledgement, unspoken but unmistakable, that the night had shifted into something meaningful. Samantha noticed the small gestures, the way he adjusted his seating slightly to be closer, the way his hands rested lightly on the armrest as if uncertain where they should go, the occasional pause when he searched for the right words. It was tender, human, and deeply affecting. Ours seemed to slip by unnoticed. The television, once the centerpiece of her quiet evening, had become irrelevant. Samantha and Daniel moved seamlessly between topics, sharing stories from the past, dreams for the future, and reflections on life's unpredictable moments. Daniel mentioned his own doubts and insecurities, admitting he often felt lost despite his outward confidence. Samantha responded with gentle understanding, offering her own insights without lecturing, creating a space where honesty felt safe. It was intimate in a way that transcended physical closeness, a meeting of minds and hearts, unplanned but entirely welcome. Then came the moment that shifted the evening from friendly familiarity to something more fragile and charged. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping into a softer, more serious tone. "I didn't just want to see you as a friend," he admitted. I needed to be here because, I don't know, I think about you a lot." Samantha's breath caught. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made the room feel smaller, more concentrated, as if their hearts were the only things that mattered in the space. She felt an unfamiliar warmth rising in her chest, a combination of surprise and something tender, a spark that she hadn't expected but couldn't ignore. Samantha looked at him, searching his face for clarity. There was no arrogance, no bravado, only honesty and vulnerability. His gaze held hers, steady and sincere, challenging her to respond with equal honesty. She felt the rush of emotions she had tried to keep buried: curiosity, traction, a strange longing that felt both new and familiar. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet intensity of two people realizing that the boundaries of their relationship were shifting, that the past and present were converging in a moment of emotional revelation. The conversation continued, but now it carried a subtle tension, a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Daniel spoke more about the impact Samantha had had on his life. How her kindness and patience shaped his perspective over the years. Samantha felt a swell of affection, admiration, and unexpected longing. She realized that he wasn't just the boy she had once guided. He was a young man capable of understanding her, of sharing a connection that felt both familiar and entirely new. The way he spoke, the way he listened, the small, careful gestures, they all made her heart race in a way she hadn't felt in years. As the night deepened, the city outside quieted, leaving only the soft hum of their apartment and the occasional flicker of the TV light. Daniel admitted he had felt nervous about coming, that he didn't know how she would react to his presence. But he had felt compelled to see her anyway. Samantha felt her own nerves mirror his, a delicate symmetry of uncertainty and hope. They shared a moment of silence, not uncomfortable, but filled with the weight of unspoken possibilities. The energy in the room had changed. It was no longer just a casual visit. Something delicate and transformative was happening. Something neither of them had anticipated, but both recognized immediately. Finally, Daniel's voice softened even further. I needed you to know," he said. "I didn't come here for anything else but to be honest. I couldn't keep it inside any longer." Samantha's chest tightened. She felt the intensity of the moment, the vulnerability, the honesty. The quiet thrill of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. The night had become a turning point. A moment where the ordinary had transformed into something extraordinary. A gentle unfolding of trust, connection, and quiet anticipation. She realized that their relationship, once clearly defined by the past, had now entered a new, fragile territory filled with potential, with possibilities neither of them had expected. The room, once filled with the static comfort of a television night, now carried the hum of emotions, curiosity, longing, nostalgia, and the first hints of something deeper. Samantha and Daniel sat there, two hearts quietly exploring the edges of a bond that had shifted from friendship into something more, something tender and emotionally charged. And as the night stretched into the early hours, both of them understood that this evening, unplanned and unexpected, had begun a story neither could have predicted, but both were eager to continue. The night had deepened, and the soft glow of the television flickered across the living room, casting long shadows on the walls. Samantha and Daniel sat closer now, though neither had made a conscious move. Words had slowed, giving way to a quiet understanding that filled the space between them. Their conversation had reached a point where ordinary topics no longer mattered. They were speaking without speaking, the silence itself charged with emotion. Samantha felt her heart beat faster, a subtle warmth spreading through her chest as she studied Daniel's face. There was honesty there, vulnerability she could see in his eyes, and it drew her in, making her suddenly aware of every detail: how the light caught his hair, the slight curve of his smile, the way he held himself with quiet tension and nervous energy. Daniel shifted slightly, leaning forward, his elbows resting lightly on his knees. He hesitated, as though weighing each word, then finally spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Samantha, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. More than I should, maybe, but I can't help it. I needed to tell you." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. Samantha's chest tightened. She hadn't expected this level of honesty. She had anticipated a casual visit, a friendly conversation, but now everything had changed. Her mind raced, caught between memories of him as a boy and the young man sitting across from her, the emotional tension leaving her breathless. She wanted to speak, to respond, but words felt heavy, fragile. She just nodded, allowing him to continue, feeling a mixture of curiosity, anxiety, and something tender stirring within her. Daniel's hands rested loosely in his lap, occasionally gesturing as he spoke. And every movement seemed deliberate, yet unsure. He confessed that he had been carrying feelings he didn't fully understand, a connection that had grown quietly over time, evolving from admiration into something more profound. Samantha listened, each word resonating, each pause making her more aware of her own emotions, the longing she hadn't acknowledged, the curiosity that refused to fade, the sudden awareness of a bond that was shifting in ways neither of them had planned. The room seemed to shrink around them, Samantha's usual composure wavered as she realized the subtle intensity in Daniel's presence. She remembered guiding him, teaching him, watching him grow, and now the dynamic felt altered, more equal, more personal. There was a strange thrill in this reversal, an unexpected pull that made her heart race. She noticed the small things, the way his gaze lingered on her, the quiet way he leaned in when he spoke, the warmth in his tone that suggested more than friendship. Each moment felt amplified, as though time itself had slowed to focus on this connection forming in the stillness of her apartment. Daniel paused, swallowing nervously, then admitted something that made Samantha's pulse quicken. "I don't know if it's right, or what it means, but I feel like I've needed you for a long time, not just as a friend." Samantha's breath caught. The honesty in his voice was raw and unfiltered, and the words struck her in unexpected ways. She hadn't thought of him like that, and yet now, hearing him speak, the possibility seemed to hover between them, fragile and tentative, demanding attention. She felt a rush of conflicting emotions, surprise, curiosity, a gentle warmth that spread from her chest to her fingertips, and an unspoken longing that she hadn't fully realized until this moment. The conversation softened, and for a while they simply watched each other, the unspoken words hanging in the air. Samantha noticed her own nervous energy reflected in his slight movements. The way he shifted in his seat, the occasional glance toward her hands as if seeking permission or reassurance. There was a delicacy to the moment, a careful balance between honesty and hesitation, as if both of them were aware that any sudden move might shatter the fragile connection forming. And yet, there was also a sense of inevitability, a quiet certainty that something meaningful was beginning to take shape. Daniel's voice broke the silence again, softer this time, almost a murmur. I needed to say it. I couldn't leave without being honest about how I feel." Samantha's mind spun. She realized that she had been holding back her own emotions, suppressing feelings she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge. Now, confronted with his vulnerability, she felt a mirror of her own hidden longing reflected in his words. It was not just attraction. She realized it was a deep emotional connection, a recognition of each other's presence in a way that transcended casual friendship. She reached out instinctively, placing her hand near his, not touching yet, but close enough that he felt it. Daniel's eyes met hers, wide with surprise and hope, and the tension between them intensified. They spoke in fragments, then hesitant but sincere, sharing moments of their lives that had shaped them. Moments of loneliness, of small triumphs, of dreams that had not yet been realized. Every word, every glance seemed to build a bridge between past familiarity and the uncharted territory of emotion that lay before them. The night felt suspended, held in a delicate balance, as if the world outside had paused to let them navigate this fragile connection. Time became irrelevant. The glow of the streetlights outside mingled with the soft flicker of the television, casting patterns across the room that seemed almost magical. Samantha felt her heart swell with something she hadn't expected: hope, excitement, and a cautious longing all intertwined. Daniel's presence was magnetic, yet gentle, creating a tension that was thrilling but not overwhelming. They leaned closer, instinctively adjusting their positions, drawn to the honesty and warmth in each other's eyes. Daniel admitted, finally, that he had been nervous about coming. He didn't know how she would respond, didn't know if she felt anything similar, but he had felt compelled to be honest anyway. Samantha listened, touched by the courage it took for him to speak. She realized that she, too, had been holding back, afraid of acknowledging feelings that seemed confusing and unexpected. Now, with the words spoken, the barrier had shifted. They were no longer just two people reminiscing. They were two individuals navigating a delicate, emotional intimacy that had quietly taken root. The room grew quieter still, the television fading into the background entirely. They talked about dreams, about hopes, about fears, each confession drawing them closer. Samantha felt herself relaxing in a way she hadn't felt in years. Her heart open, her mind alert, aware of every subtle gesture, every pause, every glance. Daniel's sincerity and vulnerability created a safe space. A moment suspended between the past and the possibility of something new. The night had become a turning point, a fragile unfolding of connection, longing, and emotional honesty by the time the clock ticked past midnight. Samantha and Daniel were no longer merely sharing conversation, they were sharing themselves. Their words had peeled back layers of formality, of caution, revealing an emotional truth neither had fully expected. The connection was delicate, charged with possibility, yet grounded in trust and familiarity. Every glance, every smile, every pause carried meaning. And the two of them understood, without saying it, that the evening had changed something fundamental. As the first signs of dawn approached, Samantha felt a quiet certainty. This night, unplanned and unexpected, had opened a door between them. It was not a door that could be easily closed. The honesty, the shared vulnerability, and the tender tension had created a foundation for something new, something neither of them could have anticipated. Yet both recognized immediately. And in that soft, quiet moment, Samantha realized that their story had begun not with grand gestures, but with words spoken honestly, hearts laid bare, and the quiet acknowledgement of a connection that had always existed, waiting for the right time to surface. Morning light seeped gently through Samantha's curtains, soft and golden, touching the room with warmth. The television had long since gone unnoticed, replaced by the quiet hum of early day sounds, the distant car engines on the street, birds singing, and the subtle creak of the floorboards as the city began to stir. Samantha woke to find Daniel still on the couch, asleep, his posture relaxed, a peaceful expression on his face. For a moment, she just watched him, her heart softening. The vulnerability she had seen in him the night before now appeared tender and human. And she felt a quiet sense of protectiveness and admiration. There was a strange mix of familiarity and newness in his presence that left her breathless in the most subtle way. She quietly moved to the kitchen to make coffee, careful not to wake him. The aroma of brewing coffee filled the apartment, blending with the soft morning air, creating a comforting atmosphere that seemed to hold the promise of new beginnings. Samantha reflected on the previous night, replaying fragments of their conversation in her mind, the honesty, the vulnerability, the connection that had shifted subtly, yet undeniably. There had been a tension, a gentle pull between them. And though she had been surprised, she also recognized a deep resonance within herself. Something had changed, something neither of them could ignore. When Daniel stirred and opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the soft sunlight and the gentle smile on Samantha's face. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke, allowing the silence to carry meaning. There was an unspoken understanding, a recognition of the emotional journey they had started together. No words were necessary. The connection was palpable. Samantha brought him a cup of coffee, and he accepted it with a quiet, grateful smile. The warmth of the gesture more meaningful than anything he could say. They sat together at the small kitchen table, sipping coffee, and for the first time, the tension of uncertainty felt replaced by a gentle, tentative comfort. Daniel broke the silence first, his voice soft yet steady. "I'm glad I came last night," he admitted. "I didn't know what would happen, but I needed to be honest. I think it was important for both of us." Samantha nodded, understanding perfectly. There had been honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to express feelings that were complicated yet sincere. They shared a quiet laugh, the tension from the night before now replaced with warmth, a gentle excitement that had not existed previously. The room felt lighter, brighter, as if the early sunlight had also illuminated their hearts. As they talked about the day ahead, small topics, surface plans, errands, and the ordinary details of life. Yet even these mundane subjects carried an underlying intimacy. Every glance, every subtle gesture, every shared smile felt charged with a gentle emotion that neither Samantha nor Daniel could deny. It was the kind of connection that came slowly, rooted in familiarity, but blossoming into something tender and new. Samantha felt her chest swell with a feeling she could not fully name, a mix of hope, curiosity, and quiet affection. She realized that this connection was real, meaningful, and worthy of exploration. At one point, Daniel reached out, brushing his hand lightly against hers. The gesture was casual yet deliberate, full of meaning without words. Samantha felt the familiar spark, the gentle electricity that had been building since the night before, and she did not pull away. Instead, she allowed herself to acknowledge the sensation, the subtle thrill of being close to someone who understood her, who had shared moments of honesty and vulnerability that were rare in her life. Daniel's eyes held hers, steady and sincere, reflecting the unspoken promise of new possibilities. They reminisced about the past, sharing memories of time spent together when Daniel had been younger and Samantha had played a role in guiding him. Those memories brought laughter, warmth, and a sense of shared history that deepened their connection. Yet, unlike the past, this moment was different. There was an awareness of emotions that neither of them had fully acknowledged before. The familiarity of the shared past, combined with the excitement of the present, created a unique space, tender and emotionally charged. Samantha realized that the bond between them had shifted from mentorship and friendship into a deeper emotional territory. That was both thrilling and delicate. As the morning unfolded, they spoke about their dreams and hopes, small ambitions and quiet desires. Daniel expressed the struggles he faced in finding his path, his uncertainties about the future, and the moments of loneliness he had carried quietly. Samantha shared her own experiences, the challenges of work, the quiet evenings that often felt empty, and the moments of longing she hadn't expressed to anyone. Each word, each revelation seemed to knit them closer together, building a foundation of trust and understanding. They were no longer just sharing space, they were sharing pieces of themselves. Fragile yet sincere, Samantha noticed subtle shifts in Daniel's demeanor, the way he leaned slightly closer when sharing a thought, the way his voice softened during certain moments, the warmth in his eyes that mirrored the quiet tenderness she felt in her own heart. There was no rush, no pressure, only the gentle unfolding of a connection that had been building silently and now had space to grow. She realized that the honesty they had shared the night before had set the stage for something new, something worth exploring carefully. With attention and care, Daniel smiled at her, a soft, genuine smile that seemed to carry both gratitude and a quiet hope. "I wasn't sure how you would feel, or if you would even want me to come," he said. Samantha shook her head, a gentle laugh escaping her. "I'm glad you did," she replied. "It was unexpected, yes, but meaningful. I've missed moments like this, real conversations, honesty, connection." The words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity, yet light with hope. They had crossed an invisible line from the familiar into something tender and promising, a territory neither had fully navigated but both were eager to explore. The morning continued, the soft light filling the apartment, the conversation flowing naturally between serious reflections and lighthearted banter. Samantha felt a sense of calm she hadn't known in months, a feeling that the quiet moments of her life were finally being filled with meaning. Daniel's presence was grounding yet exciting, familiar yet novel. And she realized that this was more than a fleeting connection. It was the beginning of a story, gentle, emotional, and rooted in honesty that neither of them could ignore by mid-morning. They moved back to the living room, settling comfortably on the couch together. There was no awkwardness, only a sense of shared understanding and a quiet anticipation of the future. The sun streamed through the windows, illuminating their faces, and Samantha felt a surge of warmth and hope. Daniel reached out again, brushing her hand lightly, and she met his gesture with a smile. There was a recognition, unspoken but clear, that the events of the night before had opened a door leading to a connection that was authentic, tender, and emotionally significant. As the morning turned toward noon, Samantha and Daniel continued their conversation, exploring feelings, sharing thoughts, and quietly discovering the possibilities of their evolving relationship. Every glance, every subtle touch, every word spoken with honesty reinforced the bond that had begun the night before. Samantha realized that this was the start of something meaningful, a journey of trust, intimacy, and emotional closeness that neither had planned but both had embraced by the time Daniel prepared to leave. The atmosphere was calm, warm, and full of possibility. They exchanged a gentle, lingering smile, one that conveyed unspoken promises, mutual understanding, and the beginning of a shared journey. The morning had transformed them both, leaving a quiet, tender sense of hope in its wake. Samantha closed the door behind him, feeling a mixture of anticipation, relief, and quiet joy. She knew that their connection had changed something fundamental, something that would continue to grow. Carefully, honestly, and beautifully. As she stood by the window, watching the city outside, Samantha reflected on the journey of the night and the morning, the honesty, the vulnerability, the emotional connection that had blossomed unexpectedly. She realized that life often surprises in the quietest moments, and that the simplest gestures, a knock at the door, a conversation, a shared cup of coffee can spark something extraordinary. The doorbell that had rung the previous night had indeed changed everything, opening a path toward emotional intimacy, trust, and the possibility of a new beginning. In that quiet apartment filled with sunlight and soft shadows, Samantha felt a sense of completion and a quiet excitement for what was to come. Their story had begun not with grand gestures, but with honesty, vulnerability, and the recognition of a connection that was real, meaningful, and deeply human. And though the future was uncertain, both Samantha and Daniel knew that they had discovered something rare, a bond built on truth, emotion, and the gentle unfolding of something beautiful between two hearts, ready to explore it together.